dethroning Lee Haskins and becoming the new IBF Bantamweight Champion of the world in a pretty impressive performance, a pretty dominant performance. One that, although one of the judges somehow had it for Haskins, I'm guessing, kind of like Eddie Hearn said in the aftermath, that he was filling in the wrong box for the wrong fighter basically the entire way because really, I mean, you could really only give Haskins 1 or maybe 2 rounds. The third round and then maybe one other one that might have been a bit close. But overall, Ryan Burnett just had pretty much every edge on him. He was a little bit quicker, a little bit sharper. He was landing the cleaner shots, the more heavy shots. He was using his height and reach advantage to his advantage in a good way. Wasn't allowing Haskins to be kind of awkward and slippery like he tends to do against a lot of his opponents, where he's kind of managed to just kind of nick like a lot of close rounds and be able to defeat a lot of guys. That's pretty much Haskins' style, very slippery and negative. But Burnett, I mean, he was just able to catch him repeatedly, especially with the right hand. The orthodox fighter fighting a southpaw, Haskins was just able to measure out that right hand really nicely, keep his left foot on the outside of Haskins' right, and did a really fantastic job of doing it pretty much all night. They had an early clash of heads where both of them were cut, both of them above the right eyebrow, interestingly enough, like almost in the exact same place, almost like a mirror image of each other. Really strange to see something like that happen. But it didn't seem like it bothered either of them particularly. The only thing that seemed to bother either fighter was in the 6th round, the first round which was the first round that Haskins actually got dropped in. It looked like he might have hurt his hand or his arm or something, where it's like he wasn't quite throwing it with very much power after that. I mean, not necessarily that he has a ton of power to begin with, but it seemed like he was pawing a lot more with it and even kind of slapping with it, or just more so, and really just being a lot more left-hand heavy after that. Whereas normally he tends to shoot that jab out with a little bit more authority and try and score with it at the very least. He wasn't really doing very much of that afterwards. It was pretty much Ryan Burnett with the rising tide all night, just putting it on Haskins. Was able to kind of just find the angles, the proper angles. Was able to kind of catch Haskins in between some of his side-to-side movement. He would catch him just almost kind of in more of like a straight-up position frequently, and just hit him with that right hand over and over again. Then, he'd smother himself on the inside a little bit in the aftermath of hitting him with that first right hand. But he was still landing, some good shots, scoring blows at the very least. And just kind of wearing on Haskins and making it so that Haskins looked like he wasn't able to quite get into any kind of a rhythm or get into the fight completely. He just looked like he was trying to solve a puzzle that he really couldn't solve the entire fight. So, I mean, a good win for Burnett. That said, I mean, Haskins, to me, was definitely the weakest champion at bantamweight. Some people might even argue one of the weaker champions in the entire sport of boxing. But that said, I mean, the way that Burnett was able to dominantly defeat him, where somebody like a Stuart Hall, for instance, kind of failed to do, it speaks well for him. That definitely puts Burnett at the very least in the top 10 of bantamweights. Maybe possibly in the top 5. Although I wouldn't necessarily put him there. I think that it's a little bit too heavy, too many solid fighters in the weight class in the top 5. You got Yamanaka out there, you got Zelani Tete, Zakianov, Payano, Solis, etc. There's a lot of really good talent in the bantamweight division. It gets a little bit overshadowed considering the fact that super flyweights right below it, and you have the big names like Chocolatito, Nai Inoue, etc. in that division. Carlos Cuadras, Juan Estrada. This might be a crazy triple header coming this fall in the super flyweight division. Nothing but super flyweights all day on HBO. But the bantamweight division is definitely popping nowadays. Ryan Burnett definitely has some good rivals to potentially fight, especially in the IBF rankings. You got Paul Butler out there, former champion Stuart Hall out there. That's just the domestic level, of course. Domestic world level, but you also have some really solid fighters from across the planet as well. Emmanuel Rodriguez, really good fighter. Nikolai Potapov, really good fighter. Ryo Akaho, really good. I seen Luis Neri is ranked in the IBF, even though he's going to be most likely fighting Shinsuke Yamanaka for the WBC. He's the mandatory for Yamanaka. And as long as that fight gets made the way it seems like it's pretty much a done deal between those two, that's going to be just an incredible fight to watch. And the winner of that fight is definitely the man of the division. Yamanaka is already the man, but if he's able to defeat the young upstart, hungry young lion, Luis Neri, that really makes him the man. You know, that definitely puts a major stamp on his reign as bantamweight champion. You know, the longest reigning champion in boxing and one of the fiercest bantamweight fighters of the modern era, really. But as for Burnett, I mean, his bantamweight reign is just starting. We'll see how long it goes. I mean, you can't really criticize him too much for this performance over Haskins. I mean, maybe you could say that, you know, he could have stepped it up a little bit, maybe tried to do some more things. You know, he did drop Haskins twice. Haskins is a pretty tough fighter, though. Tough fighter to even get a beat on in order to be able to hit completely cleanly. And he, you know, he's a pretty gritty fighter once he's hurt. You know, he's not easy to just get out of there. He's only been stopped once before. So for Burnett to pretty conclusively defeat him, I mean, is no you know, bad mark on his performance or his overall quality as a fighter. For me, the only thing that's really keeping Burnett out of being really like one of the top bantamweights at the moment would just be the fact that, you know, you can't necessarily judge him as one of the best based off of just one good win over, you know, a pretty good fighter in Haskins, but not necessarily a great champion in Haskins. You know, a good champion, but not a great champion. Not one of these guys where it's like, wow, he beat well, a straight up badass. You know, this wasn't a victory over a Jamie McDonald or Solis or a Payano or a Zlana Tete or somebody like that. You know, this was you know, a good win, very conclusive win, but over a guy that is a level below the aforementioned names. So I mean, solid win for Burnett. And, you know, it's going to be fun to watch, see if he's able to, you know, prove some things above and beyond some of his fellow UK world champions in the lower weight classes that have kind of come across the last few years. I definitely think he has the potential. He definitely has the potential to, you know, and now that the lower weight classes are starting to get a bit more attention, a bit more money is flowing through them. And also just the fact that, you know, definitely in the UK, boxing is becoming a much bigger money sport. I think the confluence of those two factors are definitely going to make for some really interesting matchups for the likes of Burnett and all the other fighters that are UK based. And not only the fighters who are UK based, but pretty much every fighter in the bantamweight division, in the super flyweight division, the flyweight division even, the super bantamweight division, of course. You know, there's definitely going to be some interesting fights that could come across for these weight classes, for the fighters involved. So hopefully some good paydays, and definitely some good matchups that should be happening for us as the fans, you know, and the critics and the pundits and so on and so forth. So solid win for Burnett. You know, good and you know, gritty performance from Haskins. You know, tough break for him. But you know, Haskins is a bit of a small bantamweight too. Matter of fact, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he could actually drop down to super flyweight, maybe try and get another fight there, maybe fight like German Akos or something, you know, like that. I wouldn't put it outside of the realm of possibility that he may be able to win another belt at that weight class, albeit maybe not necessarily the WBC and the WBO, because I think those are definitely too top heavy with, you know, the Inoues and the Chocolatitos and Quadra Estrada, Suiza Kid, etc. You know, some absolute killers right there. But I definitely think that he would be a good, stern, solid test for somebody like a Kalia Fire or German Akos. So, for what it's worth, that's what I got to say about it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.